The year was 2247, and Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora, watching the stars blur past at speeds his grandparents could never have imagined. He was 32 years old, with dark hair that never quite stayed in place and eyes that held the kind of curiosity that made him perfect for exploration. The Aurora was his ship, his home, and his purpose rolled into one sleek vessel that cut through space like a knife through water. "Captain, we're picking up something strange on the long-range scanners," said Lieutenant Kelly Brooks from her station. She was young, barely 25, but she had eyes like a hawk and never missed a detail. Jake moved closer to her console and studied the readings. There, in a sector that should have been empty according to all their charts, was a massive energy signature. It wasn't natural. Nothing in nature produced that kind of organized pulsing pattern. "Sound general alert," Jake said calmly. "Slow us down to sublight speeds. Let's not rush into anything we don't understand." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had been together for 3 years now, exploring the outer edges of known space, and they trusted each other completely. The Aurora slowed, and the blur of stars resolved into individual points of light. What appeared before them made everyone stop and stare. A ship hung in space, and calling it a ship seemed almost insulting. It was a work of art, a massive structure that looked like someone had crystallized starlight itself. It was at least 5 times the size of the Aurora, with elegant curves and surfaces that seemed to shift colors as they watched. "Are we picking up any weapon signatures?" Jake asked. "Negative, sir," replied Lieutenant Dan Cooper from Tactical. "But honestly, their technology is so far beyond ours that I'm not sure our sensors would even recognize their weapons if they had them pointed right at us." Jake nodded. It was an honest assessment and probably accurate. He took a deep breath and made his decision. "Open a channel. All frequencies. Let's say hello." The communications officer, a cheerful woman named Amy Chen, worked her console. "Channel open, Captain." Jake cleared his throat. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth exploration vessel Aurora. We come in peace and mean no harm. We are explorers from the planet Earth, and this is our first time in this region of space." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the view screen flickered and a face appeared that made everyone on the bridge catch their breath. She was beautiful, but not in any human way. Her skin was a pale blue, smooth and flawless like polished stone. Her eyes were large and silver without any visible pupil, yet somehow Jake knew she was looking directly at him. Her features were elegant and fine, with high cheekbones and a small, delicate mouth. Her hair, if it could be called that, was long and seemed to flow like liquid silver down her shoulders. "I am Princess Lyra Veltharion of the Valorian Empire," she said, and her voice was like music, clear and precise. "We have watched your species for some time now, since you first achieved faster-than-light travel. We did not expect to meet you so soon or in this manner." Jake felt his heart beating faster, but he kept his voice steady. "It's an honor to meet you, Princess Lyra. We had no idea anyone else was out here. Your ship is incredible." Something flickered across Lyra's face that might have been amusement. "Your directness is refreshing, Captain Morrison. Most species we encounter are far more cautious with their words. I would like to propose a meeting, face-to-face. There are things we should discuss." Behind him, Jake heard Dan Cooper shift nervously. Meeting an unknown alien species in person was dangerous. It went against every protocol in the book. But protocols were written by people who sat safe on Earth, not by explorers who actually met the universe face-to-face. "I would be happy to meet with you, Princess," Jake said. "Would you prefer to come aboard the Aurora, or should we come to your vessel?" "There is a neutral location that would serve us both," Lyra replied. "A space station not far from here, built long ago as a meeting place between different species. We call it Meridian Point. It is empty now, but still functional. Shall we meet there in 6 hours?" "Agreed," Jake said. "We'll see you there." The view screen went dark and immediately the bridge erupted in quiet chaos. Everyone had questions, concerns, and opinions. Jake let them talk for a minute, then raised his hand for silence. "I know this is risky," he said. "I know we're supposed to report first contact back to Earth and wait for instructions. But that would take weeks, maybe months. This is why we're out here. This is what exploration means. We take the risks so humanity can move forward." "I'm going with you," Kelly said immediately. "You're not meeting aliens alone, sir." "So am I," added Dr. Lisa Martinez, stepping onto the bridge. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. If we're making first contact, we need medical there. Who knows what we might learn? Jake looked around at his crew and felt a surge of pride. They were scared. He could see it in their faces. But they were also excited, curious, and brave. They were exactly the kind of people humanity needed among the stars. 6 hours later, Jake stood in the docking bay of Meridian Point with Kelly and Lisa beside him. The station was old, impossibly old, built by some species that had disappeared long before humans had even discovered fire. But it still worked, still provided air and gravity and light. The Valorian ship docked on the opposite side of the station, and Jake watched as a door opened in its side. Princess Lyra emerged, floating down on some kind of gravity platform. She was taller than he expected, perhaps 6.5 feet, and she moved with a grace that made it look like she was dancing rather than walking. She wasn't alone. 2 others accompanied her, both male, both wearing what looked like formal military uniforms made of that same color-shifting material as their ship. They looked stern and watchful, their silver eyes scanning everything with clear suspicion. Lyra herself wore a flowing gown that seemed to be made of light. She approached Jake and stopped about 6 feet away, her silver eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "Captain Morrison," she said softly, "thank you for meeting us. This is Captain Vorn and Lieutenant Kress. They are here for my protection, as I'm sure your companions are here for yours." Jake nodded and introduced Kelly and Lisa. There was a moment of awkward silence as the 2 groups studied each other. Then Lyra did something unexpected. She smiled, and it transformed her face from alien and distant to warm and inviting. "Shall we sit and talk?" she suggested, gesturing to a room off the main docking area. "There is much to discuss, and I find that conversation flows better when everyone is comfortable." They moved into what had once been a conference room. Ancient furniture still stood there, designed for bodies none of them possessed, but they made it work. Jake sat across from Lyra, and for the first time he could really look at her without the distance of view screens and space between them. "Your ship is called Aurora," Lyra said. "In our language, that word means new beginning. Is that intentional?" "Actually, it's named after a natural light display on Earth," Jake replied. "But I like your interpretation better. Every time we go out into space, it is a new beginning in a way." Lyra leaned forward slightly. "Captain Morrison, may I ask you a personal question?" Jake felt Kelly tense beside him, but he nodded. "Of course. Why did you become an explorer? Why do you risk your life traveling to places you've never seen, meeting species you've never known? Your planet is safe. You could live comfortably there. Yet you choose this. Why?" Jake thought about it for a moment. "Because comfortable isn't the same as alive," he said finally. "Because there are questions that need answers, and the only way to find them is to look. Because I'd rather die having seen something amazing than live a long life seeing nothing at all." Something changed in Lyra's expression. Her silver eyes widened slightly, and she looked at him with what might have been surprise or recognition or something else he couldn't name. "That is not what I expected you to say," she said quietly, "but it is exactly what I hoped to hear." Behind her, Captain Vorn said something sharp in their language. Lyra responded without looking at him, her tone firm. The exchange was brief, but Jake could tell there was tension there. "Forgive me," Lyra said, switching back to English. "My companions worry that I am being too open with you. They remind me that we are here to assess your species, not to make friends." "And what do you think?" Jake asked. Lyra met his eyes directly. "I think that assessment and friendship are not mutually exclusive. I think that your species has something we have been looking for, though we did not know it until now. And I think, Captain Morrison, that you and I are going to change both our worlds whether we intend to or not." Dr. Lisa Martinez stared at her medical console with growing disbelief. She had been reviewing the data exchange with the Valorians for 3 hours now, cross-referencing their biological information with human medical databases. And what she was finding made no sense, or rather, it made too much sense, and that was somehow worse. "Captain, you need to see this," she said into her communicator. "Now please." Jake arrived in the medical bay 15 minutes later, still wearing his dress uniform from another diplomatic meeting with Princess Lyra. They had been at Meridian Point for 2 weeks now, slowly building trust and sharing information about their respective civilizations. It had been going well, better than anyone had expected, maybe too well. "What's wrong, Lisa?" Jake asked, noting the tension in her shoulders. "Nothing's wrong exactly," Lisa said, pulling up a holographic display that showed two DNA structures side by side. But I found something that explains a lot, and it's going to cause problems. Big problems. She pointed to the left structure. This is human DNA. Specifically yours because the Valorians asked for samples from the senior crew. See these sections here, here, and here? We've always called them junk DNA. Segments that don't seem to do anything. Evolutionary leftovers that we carry around for no apparent reason. Jake nodded, though genetics had never been his strong point. Okay, I'm following. Now look at what happens when I run this through Valorian analysis technology. Lisa touched the controls, and the junk DNA section suddenly lit up in brilliant colors. It's not junk at all. These are dormant genetic switches, Jake. Safety protocols built into our DNA that activate under extreme stress or environmental pressure. They're adaptability mechanisms allowing humans to survive and evolve in response to threats. That sounds like a good thing, Jake said slowly. It is a good thing. For us. Lisa pulled up the other DNA structure. This is Valorian DNA. Notice anything? Jake studied it. Even to his untrained eye, the difference was obvious. The Valorian DNA was clean, elegant, organized like a perfectly written computer program. Human DNA, by comparison, looked messy, chaotic, full of redundancies and seemingly random elements. They're more organized than we are, Jake said. They're more than organized. They're locked. Lisa highlighted several sections. The Valorians modified their own DNA thousands of years ago. They selected the best traits, removed what they considered flaws, and created a species of incredible intelligence and physical capability. But in doing so, they removed all those adaptability switches. They can't evolve anymore, Jake. They're genetically frozen. Jake felt his stomach drop as he began to understand. And they're having problems. Major problems. Lisa pulled up another file. Their medical data shows declining birth rates, increasing genetic diseases, and weakened immune systems. They're dying, Jake. Slowly, over generations, but dying nonetheless. They bred themselves into a corner and now they can't get out. And they want what we have, Jake said quietly. You specifically. Lisa called up his genetic profile. I don't know why, but your DNA has more of these adaptability markers than anyone else on the crew. Maybe more than most humans, period. Your family survived the Mars disaster, the Titan plague, and a dozen other near-extinction events. Each time your ancestors adapted and survived, and those adaptations got written into your genes. Jake sat down heavily on the edge of a medical bed. Does Lyra know about this? If her scientists are any good, yes. They've had access to our medical data for a week now. Lisa paused. Jake, there's something else. When I dug deeper into the Valorian data, I found historical records they included. Thousands of years ago, before they modified themselves, the Valorians looked different. Their DNA had variations, diversity, adaptability. They looked more like us than they looked like themselves now. What happened? A plague. Something that killed 90% of their population. They used genetic engineering to save themselves, selecting only the traits that showed resistance to the disease. It worked. They survived. But they paid a price they're only now beginning to understand. Jake thought about Lyra, about the conversations they had been having. She had asked him so many questions about human history, about how humans dealt with disasters and diseases. He had thought she was just curious. Now he wondered if she had been looking for something specific. I need to talk to her, Jake said, standing up. Be careful, Lisa warned. We don't know what they plan to do with this information. Best case, they want to trade for genetic material. Worst case, they see Earth as a resource to be exploited. Jake found Lyra in one of the observation rooms, standing alone and looking out at the stars. She turned when he entered, and for a moment he saw something in her silver eyes that looked almost like sadness. Captain Morrison, she said formally, I wondered when you would come. You knew, Jake said. About the genetic differences. About what humans have that your people need. Lyra nodded slowly. Our scientists discovered it within hours of receiving your medical data. Your species possesses something we lost long ago. Something we thought was a weakness but now understand as a strength. Genetic chaos. Beautiful. Terrible, unpredictable chaos. She moved closer to him and Jake could see the strain on her face. Do you know what it's like, Captain? To belong to a civilization that has conquered half the galaxy, that has technology beyond your dreams, that has existed for 10,000 years, only to discover that you're dying, that all your perfection is actually a slow poison, Is that why you wanted to meet us? Jake asked. Why you agreed to this exchange? You need our help? Partly, Lyra admitted. But not in the way you think. When I first saw you on my view screen, when I first heard you speak, something in me responded. Our scanners showed your genetic profile, yes, but I saw more than that. I saw someone who chose difficulty over safety, who valued discovery over comfort, who faced the unknown with curiosity rather than fear. Those are traits my people have lost, Jake. Not in our genes, but in our hearts. She reached out and her hand hovered near his, not quite touching. My father, the Supreme Chancellor, sees your species as a solution to our genetic problems. My brother Kale sees you as a threat to our purity. My people are divided between those who want to trade with you and those who want to control you. But I see something else. I see a chance for both our species to become something better than we are alone. What do you want, Lyra? Jake asked softly. I want you to understand something before the politics and the fear and the negotiations begin, she said. You asked me once why I became a diplomat, why I travel space when I could live safely on Valoria Prime. I told you it was duty. That was a lie. The truth is I was looking for something my people no longer have. Purpose, challenge, growth. And then I met you and I found it. Before Jake could respond, an alarm blared through the station. Kelly's voice came over the communicator, sharp with urgency. Captain, we've got incoming ships. Multiple Valorian vessels just dropped out of hyperspace. Heavy military signatures. Jake and Lyra rushed to the command center. The displays showed 6 Valorian warships surrounding Meridian Point, their weapons powered but not yet targeting anything. On the main screen, a face appeared that made Lyra stiffen beside him. The man looked like an older, harder version of Lyra. His blue skin was darker, his features more severe, and his silver eyes held no warmth at all. He wore elaborate robes that marked him as someone of great importance. Daughter, he said, and his voice was like ice. You have been conducting unauthorized genetic research with an inferior species. This is unacceptable. You will return to the flagship immediately, and the humans will surrender all biological samples for proper analysis. Father, Lyra said, and Jake heard anger in her voice. These humans are not subjects for study. They are potential allies, potential partners. You cannot simply take what you want from them. Can I not? Chancellor Darius Veltharion smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We are the Valorian Empire, child. We have ruled this sector for millennia. One primitive species with useful genetic traits does not change that. Jake stepped forward, putting himself between the screen and Lyra. With respect, Chancellor, we're not primitive and we're definitely not inferior. We're different. And from what I understand, different is exactly what you need right now. Darius looked at Jake as if noticing him for the first time. Captain Morrison, the human with the remarkable genes. Tell me, do you understand what you possess? Your DNA contains solutions to problems that have plagued my people for generations. In a just universe, you would donate it freely for the greater good. In a just universe, you'd ask instead of demand, Jake replied, and you'd offer something in return instead of surrounding us with warships. For a long moment, Darius stared at Jake. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a cold sound, but genuine. I see why my daughter finds you interesting. You have courage, I'll grant you that. Very well, Captain. Let us negotiate. But understand this. One way or another, the Valorian Empire will have access to human genetic material. The only question is whether humanity benefits from that access or suffers from it. The screen went dark, and Jake turned to find Lyra looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said quietly, for standing up to him. Most people are too afraid. I'm terrified, Jake admitted. But being scared is... The Aurora raced through space at maximum speed, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the Valorian fleet. Jake stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display and hoping his decision to grant Lyra asylum wouldn't be the thing that started an interstellar war. They're following us. Captain, Dan Cooper reported from Tactical. 6 ships maintaining pursuit at a distance of 2 light minutes. They're not trying to catch us, just keeping us in sensor range. They want to see where we're going, Kelly said from navigation. They're tracking us back to Earth. Jake had already thought of that. Change course. Take us to the Titan research station instead. It's a human facility, but far enough from Earth that if things go wrong, we won't be leading them straight to our homeworld. Aye, Captain. Course laid in. Jake left Dan in command and headed to the guest quarters where Lyra had been given space. He found her standing by the window, looking out at the stars with an expression of deep sadness on her face. "Regretting your choice already?" Jake asked gently. Lyra turned and he saw that her eyes were wet. Apparently Valorians could cry, though their tears were silver like liquid mercury. "I have abandoned my people, my family, my entire life. Everything I knew is back there on those ships. Of course I have regrets, Captain, but that doesn't mean I made the wrong choice." Jake moved to stand beside her. "For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. And I promise you, we'll figure this out together. Humanity won't let you down." "You shouldn't make promises you can't keep," Lyra said, but there was a small smile on her face, though I appreciate the sentiment. Over the next 3 weeks, as the Aurora made its way to Titan Station, something unexpected happened. Lyra began to integrate into the crew, and in doing so she began to change. Or perhaps she was simply becoming who she had always wanted to be. She spent hours in the medical bay with Lisa, sharing Valorian medical knowledge and learning about human biology. She discovered that humans found her formal speech patterns amusing, and slowly she began to relax her vocabulary, using contractions and casual phrases that would have horrified the Valorian court. She ate meals in the crew mess hall, fascinated by the variety of human food, and shocked by how much flavor humans built into their meals. Valorian food was efficient, nutritionally perfect, and utterly bland. Human food was messy, inconsistent, sometimes too salty or too sweet, and absolutely delicious. "This is called pizza," Jake explained one evening, watching as Lyra cautiously tried her first slice. "It's not fancy, but it's a favorite comfort food for a lot of humans." Lyra took a bite and her silver eyes widened. "This is incredible. How do you make the cheese do that stretchy thing? And these small round circles, pepperoni. They're so salty and satisfying. Why didn't anyone tell me about pizza?" Jake laughed. "Because the Valorian Diplomatic Corps probably serves you nutritionally optimized paste, not real food." "Our scientists eliminated the need for varied diet centuries ago," Lyra said, taking another large bite. "Now I'm wondering what else we eliminated that we shouldn't have." But it wasn't just Lyra who was changing. Jake found himself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the way she asked questions about everything, to how she listened with complete focus when he talked about his childhood on Mars colony or his dreams of exploring beyond known space. She told him about growing up in the Valorian palace, about the weight of expectations and the loneliness of being perfect. She described a life where every moment was scheduled, every action judged, every relationship evaluated for political advantage. It sounded like a beautiful prison. "Did you ever have any real friends?" Jake asked one night. They were alone in the observation lounge, watching the stars drift past. "I had companions," Lyra said carefully. "Other nobles, children of important families. We were educated together, trained together. But friends? No, friendship requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is weakness in Valorian society. Or at least that's what I was taught." "That's sad," Jake said simply. "Is it?" Lyra looked at him. "We build our society on logic, on rational thought, and careful planning. Emotions are considered unreliable, particularly among the ruling class. I always accepted that as truth. But then I met your crew and I saw something different. Kelly jokes with Dan even though he outranks her. Lisa argues with you about medical decisions. Everyone laughs together, helps each other, worries about each other. It's chaotic and inefficient, and somehow it works better than our perfect system. That's because we're not trying to be perfect," Jake said. "We're just trying to be good enough together." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "Jake, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Why aren't you afraid of me? Most of your crew, they're polite, they're kind, but I can sense their wariness. They see me as alien, as other, but you don't. Why?" Jake thought about it. "I guess because I don't see why being different matters. You're smart. You're curious. You care about doing what's right even when it's hard. Those are the things that matter to me. The blue skin and silver eyes are just details." Something in Lyra's expression shifted. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and touched his face with her cool fingers. In Valorian culture, touching someone's face is very intimate. It's a gesture reserved for family or for someone you trust completely. "May I?" Jake nodded, his heart beating faster. Lyra's hand was gentle as she traced the line of his jaw, studying his features with intense focus. "You're fascinating to me," she said softly. "Not because of your genes or your genetic potential, because you're kind without being weak, confident without being arrogant, and brave enough to see me as a person rather than a princess or a problem." "Lyra," Jake started to say, but she shook her head. "I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I need you to know something." She met his eyes directly. "In Valorian culture, we believe in bonding. When two people connect deeply enough, they can form a telepathic link, sharing thoughts and emotions. It's rare and it's sacred, and it only happens with someone who truly understands you." "And?" Jake asked, though he thought he knew what she was going to say. "And I can feel the beginnings of that bond with you. It shouldn't be possible. You're human, I'm Valorian, our minds work differently. But it's there, growing stronger every day, and I don't want to fight it anymore." Before Jake could respond, Kelly's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, to the bridge. We've got a situation." Jake and Lyra rushed to the bridge to find the crew staring at the main view screen in shock. There, displayed in high resolution, was a news broadcast from Earth, and the headline made Jake's blood run cold. "Human captain kidnaps Valorian princess. Earth faces possible war." The news anchor was speaking rapidly, showing images of the Aurora, of Jake, of Lyra. The story was everywhere, on every channel, spreading across human space like wildfire. According to the reports, Jake had taken Lyra by force, possibly under the influence of alien mind control. The Valorian Empire was demanding her immediate return and threatening military action if humanity refused to comply. "That's not what happened at all," Kelly said angrily. "She asked for asylum. We have it recorded." "Play the recording," Jake ordered. They did, but as Jake watched it, his heart sank. From a certain angle, with certain assumptions, it could look like Lyra had been coerced. She had been under stress, emotional, desperate. To someone looking for evidence of kidnapping, the footage could be interpreted that way. "It's my father," Lyra said quietly. "He's spinning this to his advantage. If I'm a victim, he looks like a protective parent. If I chose to leave, he looks weak. So he's making me a victim whether I want to be or not." "Can you make a statement?" Lisa suggested. "Tell everyone the truth?" "I can try," Lyra said. "But who will believe me? My father controls most of the information networks in Valorian space, and humans don't know me. Why would they trust that I'm telling the truth?" Jake made a decision. "Then we prove it. We show them what you've done here, how you've helped us, how you've chosen to work with humanity rather than against it. Kelly, arrange a live broadcast. Get as many channels as possible. If they're going to tell lies about us, we'll fight back with truth." The broadcast went live 2 hours later. Jake and Lyra sat together in front of the camera, and she spoke directly to both their peoples. "My name is Princess Lyra Veltharian, and I am not a victim. I am not a captive. I am here by choice, by my own free will, because I believe in a future where Valorians and humans work together rather than against each other. Captain Morrison and his crew have shown me kindness, respect, and friendship. They have treated me as an equal, not as a trophy or a resource, and I will not let my father's political games destroy the possibility of peace between our species." She paused, then continued. "I know many Valorians will see my choice as betrayal. I know many humans fear that I'm a spy or a threat. But I ask both peoples to consider this. We need each other. Valorians have technology, knowledge, and structure. Humans have adaptability, creativity, and hope. Alone, both our species face challenges that may destroy us. Together we could build something better than either of us could achieve alone." Jake spoke next, his words simple and direct. "I'm not a politician or a diplomat. I'm an explorer. My job is to find new things, meet new people." The message came in the middle of the night, encrypted so heavily that it took Lisa's computers 3 hours to decode it. When Jake finally read it, sitting alone in his quarters with a cold cup of coffee, he had to read it twice to believe what he was seeing. The message was from someone named Elder Scientist Mira, a high-ranking Valorian researcher. It was addressed to both him and Lyra, and it contained information that could change everything. Jake went to Lyra's quarters and knocked softly. She answered quickly, already awake and dressed. Apparently, Valorians didn't need much sleep. "I got a message," Jake said. "I think you need to see it." They went to his office and pulled up the message on his private terminal. Lyra read it silently, her silver eyes moving rapidly across the text. As she read, her expression changed from curiosity to shock, to something that looked like grief. "This can't be real. she whispered. Mira wouldn't lie, but this is impossible. Our entire history, what does it say? Jake asked. I couldn't understand all the technical parts. Lyra sat down heavily. Mira has been researching ancient Valorian archives, records from before the Great Plague that nearly destroyed us. She found something that was buried, hidden, maybe deliberately erased from our history. She took a deep breath. 10,000 years ago, Valorians were not like we are now. We had genetic diversity. Different skin colors, different body types, different abilities. We were more like humans than like modern Valorians. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What happened? The plague happened. It killed 90% of the population in just 10 years. Our scientists worked desperately to find a cure, to save what was left of our species. They used genetic engineering, selecting only the traits that showed resistance to the disease. They built new Valorians from the survivors, creating the elegant, uniform species you see today. That makes sense, Jake said slowly. They did what they had to do to survive. But there's more. Lyra's hands were shaking slightly. Before the plague, Valorians had encountered another species. A species with remarkable genetic diversity and adaptability. That species shared their knowledge with us, helped us understand genetics well enough to save ourselves. And then after we survived, we erased them from our history. We were ashamed that we needed help from others. Who were they? Mira doesn't know. The records were too damaged. But she has a theory, Jake. A theory that explains everything. Lyra looked at him with desperate intensity. What if that species and humanity share a common ancestor? What if millions of years ago, some incredibly advanced civilization seeded different worlds with the same basic genetic template? Earth's chaotic evolution would have preserved that original diversity. Valoria's controlled breeding would have locked it away. You're saying humans and Valorians might be related? Distantly, very distantly, but yes. It would explain why our biologies are compatible enough to share medical data. It would explain why your junk DNA looks so familiar to our scientists. And it would explain this. She pulled up another file from Mira's message showing complex genetic comparisons. Your dormant genetic switches match patterns we find in ancient Valorian DNA before the modifications. You're not alien to us, Jake. You're what we used to be. Jake sat back, his mind racing. If this is true, if your people know this, it changes everything. You can't claim genetic superiority over humans if we're basically cousins. Exactly. Which is why this information is dangerous. Mira says she's presenting it to the Valorian High Council in 3 days. She wants us to be there. To stand as proof that cooperation between our species is not just possible but necessary. Will they listen to her? Lyra's expression was bleak. Some will. The scientists, the scholars, the people who care more about truth than tradition, but the nobles, the military, the ones who have built their entire identity on being the galaxy's superior species, they'll fight this with everything they have. My brother Kale leads that faction. He'll see this as heresy. What do you want to do? Jake asked. I want to go back, Lyra said firmly. I want to stand with Mira when she presents this evidence. I want to look my father in the eye and tell him that his perfect empire is built on lies and fear. I want to fight for a future where both our peoples can be honest about who we are and where we came from. That's incredibly dangerous. If Kale's faction wins, they could arrest you, maybe worse. I know. But running away didn't work. Hiding on your ship and hoping for the best didn't change anything. Sometimes the only way forward is through the fire, not around it. Jake made his decision in that moment. Then I'm going with you. You stood up for humanity when you asked for asylum. Now it's time for humanity to stand up for you. Kelly was less enthusiastic when Jake told her the plan. Captain, with all due respect, this is insane. You're talking about flying directly to the Valorian homeworld, into the heart of their empire, to testify at some kind of alien court hearing. They could arrest all of us, they could, Jake agreed. But they won't, because we're not going alone. Over the next 2 days, Jake sent messages to every human ship, every explorer, every scientist and diplomat he knew. He told them what was happening, what Mira had discovered, and what it meant for human-Valorian relations. He asked for support, for backup, for anyone willing to take the risk. The response surprised even him. Within 48 hours, 12 human ships had gathered near the Aurora. Not military vessels, but explorers, researchers, even a few private ships owned by wealthy adventurers who thought the whole thing sounded exciting. It wasn't an army, but it was a statement. Humanity stood together. Commander Steve Palmer sent a personal message. Jake, I can't officially support this. Earth Council would have my head. But unofficially, I've arranged for a few military observers to be in the area, just in case things go wrong. Try not to start a war, okay? The journey to Valoria Prime took 3 days. The planet was beautiful, a world of blue oceans and silver cities that looked like they had been grown rather than built. As the Aurora and its escort of human ships approached, they were met by a massive Valorian fleet. For a tense moment, Jake thought they would be fired upon. Then a message came through. It was Mira, an elderly Valorian woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. Captain Morrison, Princess Lyra, thank you for coming. The High Council has agreed to hear the evidence. They've granted you safe passage and permission to testify. Your escort may remain in orbit, but only your ship may land. The Aurora descended through Valoria Prime's atmosphere and landed at an enormous spaceport near the capital city. Jake, Lyra, and Lisa were met by Mira and a security detail that looked more ceremonial than threatening. Thank you for bringing her home, Mira said to Jake, embracing Lyra warmly. The capital has been in chaos since she left. Half the population thinks she's a hero, the other half thinks she's a traitor. Which half is right? Jake asked. Mira smiled. Both, probably. That's the nature of real change. It makes everyone uncomfortable. The High Council chamber was enormous, a circular room with seats rising and tiers all around. At the top sat Chancellor Darius, looking stern and cold. Beside him sat a younger Valorian who could only be Kael, Lyra's brother. His face was twisted with barely contained anger. Hundreds of Valorians filled the other seats, nobles and scientists and military officers and common citizens who had been granted access to witness the proceedings. Jake had never felt so small and exposed. Mira stood at the center of the chamber and began her presentation. She showed the ancient records, the genetic data, the evidence of Valorian diversity before the plague. She explained how the genetic modifications had saved the species but trapped them in an evolutionary dead end. Then she showed the comparisons with human DNA. The connections, the similarities, the possibility of common origin. Jake watched the Valorians in the audience as they processed this information. Some looked fascinated, others looked horrified. Many just looked confused. Kael stood up, his voice ringing through the chamber. This is heresy. Elder Mira asks us to believe that we are related to these primitive humans, that our perfection is actually a weakness. She would have us abandon 10,000 years of careful genetic stewardship and embrace chaos. Not chaos, Mira replied calmly. Diversity, adaptability, the very things that allowed our ancestors to survive in the first place. The very things we need now if we want to survive the next 1,000 years. We don't need them, Kael said with contempt. We can take what we need, their genetic material, their adaptive traits. We can incorporate these into our own genome without lowering ourselves to their level. Is that what you think we are? Jake spoke up, unable to stay quiet any longer. A resource to be harvested? You're right that we're different from you, but those differences make us strong. You call it chaos. I call it resilience. You call it primitive. I call it survival. A human speaks in the High Council, Kael said mockingly. How far we have fallen. Let him speak, Chancellor Darius said quietly. It was the first time he had spoken, and his voice carried weight. I'm curious what he has to say. Jake took a breath and stepped forward. I'm just a ship captain. I'm not a scientist or a politician. But I've seen something these past few weeks that none of you have seen. I've watched your princess, a woman raised in luxury and perfection, eat pizza with my crew and laugh at jokes she didn't quite understand. I've seen her stay up. 5 years had passed since that historic day in the High Council chamber. 5 years of slow, difficult progress. 5 years of building bridges between two worlds that had almost gone to war. And now, Jake Morrison stood in his quarters aboard the Aurora, adjusting his formal uniform and wondering how his life had brought him to this moment. You look nervous, Lisa said from the doorway. She had been promoted to Chief Medical Officer for the entire Human Valorian Research Initiative and barely had time to visit anymore. But she had made time for this. I'm terrified, Jake admitted. This ceremony is being broadcast to both worlds, billions of people watching. What if I mess it up? You won't. Lisa smiled. You've been training for this for months. Besides, Lyra will be right there with you. She won't let you fall. The past 5 years had not been easy. After the Council's decision to pursue cooperation with humanity, there had been resistance from both sides. Valorian nobles who saw humans as inferior, human extremists who feared becoming experiments for alien scientists. 3 separate assassination attempts on both Jake and Lyra. Protests, demonstrations, and countless diplomatic incidents. But there had been progress too. Real, meaningful progress. The Meridian Accords had been signed, establishing frameworks for cultural exchange, genetic research cooperation, and mutual defense. Valorian scientists now worked alongside human researchers on both Earth and Valoria Prime. Joint exploration missions ventured into unknown space together. The genetic research had been particularly successful. Dr. Lisa Martinez and Elder, scientist Mira had developed voluntary genetic therapy programs that helped Valorian families struggling with genetic diseases. It wasn't forced breeding or harvesting. It was careful, ethical science that required consent from all parties and provided benefits to both species. Human medicine had advanced by centuries almost overnight, with Valorian technology helping to cure diseases that had plagued humanity for generations. In return, Valorians gained access to genetic diversity they desperately needed, strengthening their immune systems and increasing birth rates for the first time in 1,000 years. The first human Valorian child had been born 3 years ago, to a couple who had met during a cultural exchange program. Little Sophie Chenvel, as her parents named her, was healthy, happy, and possessed traits from both species. She had become a symbol of what cooperation could achieve, but that wasn't why billions would be watching today. Today was about something more personal, something that had captivated both worlds since it began. Today, Captain Jake Morrison and Princess Lyra Veltharian would formally bond in a ceremony that combined human and Valorian traditions. The ceremony took place on Meridian Point, the same station where they had first met 5 years ago. It had been restored and expanded, now serving as the permanent headquarters for human Valorian cooperation. The main hall had been decorated with flowers from Earth and luminescent crystals from Valoria Prime, creating a stunning blend of both cultures. Jake walked down the aisle between rows of seats filled with friends, family, dignitaries, and representatives from both species. His mother was there, crying happy tears. Commander Steve Palmer sat in full military dress, grinning like an idiot. The Aurora's crew occupied an entire section, all of them wearing their best uniforms. On the Valorian side, Chancellor Darius sat in the front row, his expression neutral but not hostile. Elder Mira was there, beaming with pride. Even Prince Kale had come, though he still looked like he had bitten into something sour. But his presence was significant. It showed that even the strongest opponents of the alliance were beginning to accept the new reality. At the end of the aisle, Lyra waited. She wore a gown that seemed to shift between human white and Valorian silver, flowing and elegant. Her silver eyes locked onto Jake's as he approached, and he saw love there, clear and unmistakable. The ceremony was conducted by both a human officiant and a Valorian elder, each speaking their traditions. The human part was familiar to Jake, full of promises and vows and rings exchanged. The Valorian part was stranger, involving telepathic connection and genetic bonding rituals that he still didn't fully understand. But when Lyra took his hands, and they spoke their vows together, promising to stand as equals, to bridge their worlds, and to face whatever future came with courage and love, Jake understood perfectly. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a statement. It was 2 people from different worlds saying that differences didn't matter as much as connection. "Do you, Jake Morrison, accept this bond?" the human officiant asked. "I do," Jake said clearly. "Do you, Lyra Veltharian, accept this bond?" the Valorian elder asked. "I do," Lyra replied. "Then by the authority vested in me by both Earth and Valoria Prime, I declare you bonded, in human terms married, partners in all things. You may seal the bond." Jake and Lyra kissed and the hall erupted in applause. Humans cheered. Valorians made a musical sound that indicated approval. It was chaotic and loud and imperfect and absolutely perfect. The reception that followed was a blend of both cultures. Human food and Valorian delicacies side by side. Music that combined Earth's rhythms with Valoria's harmonics. Dancing that looked awkward at first as both species figured out how to move together, but gradually became natural. Chancellor Darius approached Jake during a quiet moment. Captain Morrison, or should I say my son-in-law. Either works, sir, Jake said diplomatically. I owe you an apology, Darius said, surprising Jake. When we first met, I saw you as a resource, a means to an end. I didn't see you as a person, as someone my daughter could love. I was wrong. You have done more for both our peoples than centuries of diplomats and politicians, and you have made my daughter happier than I have ever seen her. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. But know this. Darius's expression grew serious. You have taken on a great responsibility. As the first bonded couple between our species, you and Lyra will be watched constantly. Every decision you make, every child you have, will be scrutinized. It is an unfair burden, but it is the price of being pioneers. We're ready for it, Jake said confidently. I hope so. Because there are still those who oppose this alliance. My son Kyle, for one. He accepted the Council's decision, but he has not accepted it in his heart. Watch your back, Captain. Not all threats come from strangers. The warning was sobering, but Jake refused to let it ruin the day. This was about hope, not fear. This was about building something new, not protecting something old. Later, Jake and Lyra stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the gathered ships from both species. Human and Valorian vessels side by side. A fleet united in purpose rather than divided by suspicion. Can you believe we're actually married? Jake asked, using the human term. Bonded, I mean. I can believe it, Lyra said, leaning into him. It feels right, like this was always where we were meant to end up. Your father warned me that we're going to be watched constantly, that every choice we make will be scrutinized. He's right. We're symbols now, whether we want to be or not. Lyra looked up at him. Does that scare you? A little, Jake admitted. But mostly it just makes me determined. If we're going to be symbols, let's be good ones. Let's show both our peoples that differences are strengths, not weaknesses. A year later, standing in a medical facility that served both species, Jake held his daughter for the first time. Elena Vel Morrison was tiny, barely 7 pounds, with skin that was a pale lavender shade somewhere between human tan and Valorian blue. She had her mother's large eyes, though they were green like Jake's instead of silver. Her hair, what little of it there was, seemed to shift between brown and silver depending on the light. Dr. Lisa Martinez smiled as she finished the scans. She's perfect, completely healthy. The genetic integration is seamless. She has human adaptability and Valorian enhanced cognition. Not superior to either species, just different. Special. Lyra reached out to touch her daughter's tiny hand, and Elena grabbed her finger with surprising strength. She's going to have questions someday, about why she looks different, about which world she belongs to. Then we'll tell her the truth, Jake said, that she belongs to both worlds, that she's proof that cooperation and love can create something beautiful. The years that followed were full of challenges. Elena grew quickly, displaying traits from both species in unexpected ways. She learned to walk earlier than human children, but needed help with fine motor control longer than Valorian children. She was incredibly intelligent but also incredibly emotional, a combination that sometimes overwhelmed her. But she was also happy, surrounded by love from both sides of her family. Chancellor Darius, now retired and much gentler in his old age, doted on his granddaughter. Jake's mother visited from Earth regularly, bringing toys and sweets and stories. The Aurora's crew treated Elena like she was everyone's child, teaching her about ships and stars and exploration. By the time Elena was 3, the human-Valorian alliance had become normal rather than revolutionary. Dozens of joint exploration missions were underway. Trade between the two species was thriving. Interspecies friendships and relationships were common enough that they no longer made headline news. Jake had been promoted to admiral, overseeing the entire joint exploration fleet. Lyra served as the primary diplomatic liaison between Earth and Valoria Prime, a position that,